Time for another heat sheet here on the call-up, which means you got Aram Layton, Elijah Evans. We've got a lot of bats, some arms, and I would say a little bit more upper-level bats. Of course, that's because the low A season is winding down, but we still have a couple bats on that front to talk about. But AAA, some of the more notable prospects are really heating up and sprinting through the finish line. We're going to talk about that, and then some arms that have been very impressive. Elijah, you put together this list as always. I like the idea of the top prospects and some guys that we've kind of been waiting on sprinting through the finish line here, and I feel like that's kind of the theme here, at least with the bats of this episode.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of guys that we've talked about before, but we have wanted to see that next step, and now you're seeing it at the end of the season, and it puts some of these guys in a really good position to enter next year on a high note and just be, ready to attack full on next season. And I think guys that we're expecting to be in the bigs fairly soon next season. It's not just like, oh, they're going to be in the bigs later next season. It's guys that, with a strong last month of the year, now they're in position to go into spring training and they can earn a spot.
That's the big thing, right? Especially the AAA guys. If you sprint through the finish line here, how much momentum can you carry into the offseason, into spring training? With a good spring, did you show enough at the end of the AAA season to maybe break camp? And I feel like that's going to be the conversation with the first three guys that we talk about here on the heat sheet.
Yeah, definitely. And then even some more that are in AA still potentially. The first one is Travis Bazzana. I think that's probably the most obvious player that fits this bucket of what we just alluded to there. Bazzana has had the injuries. He wasn't that great in AA. It's not to say he was bad at all because he's still a stud, but for first overall pick, there were some things where you were like, okay, we want to see a little more from him. First 25 AAA games for Bazzana, it's a 143 WRC plus. He's walking at a 24% clip. Still striking out a good amount, but he's getting on base with the best of them at a 427 mark of just an on-base percentage. He's going to get those walks, but now it's at an incredibly high level, and you're still seeing him kind of slowly but surely tap into more of that impact. Bazzana, I don't think it's this year because the Guardians are probably out of it. If they somehow go on a 5-game winning streak here this week, I wouldn't completely rule it out. But at the very least, he's going into spring training with the ability to earn a spot at a camp.
Yeah, and I think that's something that you look at the offense or lack thereof, and you assume they're probably not going to be super aggressive in the free agent market in Cleveland. Bazzana is a guy that could easily break camp and is a rookie of the year candidate just off of, I think what the floor can be. And I think this stretch is fascinating though, because I think it's a new kind of reimagined high floor in the respect that Bazzana is not the 60 plus hit tool guy that I think he was advertised as an amateur. And maybe that's still in there and it needs to be unlocked and we'll see. But at least what I'm seeing is the plate discipline is elite. And he's going to sell out for that power now. And power didn't really appear to be the leading aspect of his game when we saw him in college, but it was there, right? And the ability to air pull and all of those things. He's extremely patient, and I think borders on passive, but the swing decisions are mostly really solid, and I think does a pretty good job of fending off the passiveness for the most part. You can see that kind of through the zone swing, but I mean, we're talking about a 26-game stretch here where he's chasing at a 13% clip. That's great, right? That's what's resulted in that ridiculously high walk rate. A lot of deep counts, though. You're going to punch if you're not elite bat to ball wise, and if you look at even just the contact rates over the course of the season, they're not bad, but they're not elite. It's 79% contact rate, that's fine. 83% in-zone contact rate, that's fine. Those are both slightly above average figures, but that's not, I think, what people were fully expecting. That's okay if the plate discipline is what it's been, and he's getting his from a slug perspective. So it's funny. It seems like Bazzana's kind of skewing a little bit more towards the 3 true outcomes. That will still be a productive player, and he gives you some speed on the base paths and things like that as well. Maybe he centers himself a little bit more as he gets more comfortable, but he seems okay being the guy that, lets it eat, tries to really get into that slug. And, if he strikes out 25% of the time, it doesn't seem like it's a huge concern to him. And I will say over the stretch of these last handful of games, he's slugging, man. I mean, he had a multi-homer game. He had 4 homers in a 4-game stretch. And then even the last couple games where he was hitless, he's walked 3 times. So it seems like the OBP side is going to be his high floor.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it's funny to see the shift in kind of how we're viewing him as a player in just over a year now. And maybe this still changes as he evolves, but it is different to see him categorized as this, above average hit tool guy who can get on base a ton by walking and is going to tap into power compared to this, like, potential 70 grade hit tool that we were talking about out of the draft last year, right? So
Yeah.
you kind of hit on that there, but it's like it is a different profile than I think we initially anticipated from Bazzana. Nonetheless, he still could be one of Cleveland's, three best hitters next season, and it wouldn't surprise anybody really.
No, no, yeah, exactly. And I think we've seen some guys get up to the show and start to unlock a little bit more juice. I think the ball is even this year where there's been a little bit more drag with the ball. You still see the EVs pop a little bit more, I think, once these guys get to the show. So if he has a little bit more there, that's going to help. But there is pressure on him to slug here now with the way that he's leaning into it. And I think there's clearly 20 home run pop in here, and that's what we're seeing. But the other thing that still stands out to me is he's got the ability to spoil. The out-of-zone contact rates are still really solid. So maybe that's something that becomes a little bit more a part of his game as he gets more comfortable, and maybe the hit tool creeps back in. But I do think it ultimately is going to be that closer to average hit, really good plate discipline, and then it's just how much is he going to slug there that determines his ceiling. And it's going to be an uphill battle given his defense to get to that 3-4 WAR plateau. But if you're a 20-plus homer guy who's walking at a really high clip and can grab 20 bags, it's still going to be a really valuable player at second base. And I think we're seeing him get closer and closer to that with this hot stretch.
Yeah, definitely. Still a valuable piece and still, a top 50 prospect in baseball, even if he's fallen a little bit off of where he once was. The next guy up is another one who's a big-time name, top draft pick, and that is Walker Jenkins of the Twins organization. We talked about him about a month ago when he was starting to find his groove, kind of, and starting to really show that upside. The past week and a half, just in September so far for Jenkins, has been like the culmination of all of that, I think. His last, his 8 games so far in September, he's 14 for 33. That's 424 average, 5 extra base hits in those 8 games. Yeah, he's whiffing a little bit. I still think that's gonna happen, and I think you still want to see the walk rate, I think, for Jenkins tick up a little bit from where it is. It's 10% so far in AAA, but still, you're seeing the best version of him that we saw spurts of a few weeks ago and earlier in this last few months, and now the past week or two, you're really seeing that full version of him, at least at AAA, start to shine through.
No doubt. And I was hoping, so we're going to do like a Arizona Fall League prospects breakdown. I was hoping Jenkins would be out there. I'm surprised that he's not. But this has been a really encouraging stretch. I agree with the walk thing, and I wonder if, because historically the plate discipline has been so good, I wonder if it's partly him trying to make up for lost time, and trying to do too much. But at the same time, would you call it doing too much when he is doing everything right now that you want to see? So he's seeing the ball and really well, and he's feasting. So it's hard to, I guess, say that he should swing less, but I do think over the macro scale, you want to see him get back to who he is and be that well-balanced, plate discipline, bat to ball, and then the power starts to shine through. That's the big thing for me too, is the quality of contact when he first came back was not great, and now you're seeing that quality of contact start to really perk up a little bit here. There was a 99 mile per hour sinker from Luis May that he turned around 110 miles per hour, and that seems to be Jenkins' MO now. Is like, I don't think he's gonna take these crazy aggressive hacks or whatever, but I do think he's going to turn it around, and like the harder it comes in, the harder it's going to go out. And I think the baseline is solid, but we're seeing now against higher velocity, like he's going to take that same swing, and it seems to be going out a little bit harder. But there's not that violence with his swing, but I think that's okay. I think there's still clearly enough strength and pop, and he's starting to flash that more and more. The other thing is, you mentioned that 8-game stretch. In that stretch, he's only put the ball on the ground 16% of the time. So finding a lot more air, and that's kind of been the trend since he's come back, period. The last 40 games, it's a 34% ground ball rate. So he's getting the ball in the air. The quality of contact is slowly getting better and better. And clearly he's had no issue acclimating to AAA, even with him being a little bit more aggressive than he normally is. So those are all really encouraging things. And I think if you're a Twins fan, you can't help but think about him as a break camp candidate going into next year as well, even though it's been a short stint in AAA, and they probably will want to see a few more games out of him there, and maybe they'll prioritize the extra year of control. I think he's at least making it a conversation here if he can continue this over the next week or so and finish strong. But I mean, when you're talking about a stretch here where it was a 3-hit game, 2-hit game, 2-hit game, 2-hit game, 3-hit game. That's all going to be a really good sign heading into the offseason. Again, just want to see a little bit more slug, but I think it's coming.
Yeah, and one note on your point there with just him kind of impacting the ball more. Yeah, the EV might be 110 right now. It might not be popping 115, 116s, but it's over 50% hard hit rate since getting to AAA, right? So that's kind of that jump where you're still seeing him make good quality contact more often now compared to earlier in the season, which is a great note just for him moving forward. And I think you're spot on there with like the Twins. I'm interested to see how they handle it because like they're not going to compete next year. So part of me thinks they may be a little more patient with him. But at the same time, he could come into spring training and just light it up, and then they can't like hold him back, right?
Yeah, and you also bring up the point of so you may not get the 115s, and that's fine because to your point, you're getting a lot of 95s and a lot of 100s and a lot of 103s, and that's kind of the letting the pitcher supply the power thing because he's got enough strength. You might get the 111s, 112s when it comes in really hard, but the thing is if he's starting to hit the ball at the right angles, when you've got a lot of loft and it's 95 plus at a high clip, you're going to still hit plenty of home runs. So he doesn't really need much more raw power at this point. And I think that's the important thing. And it's going to really just come down to that hit tool continuing to be, what we have seen, and that approach continuing to be what we have seen as well. So one of the best prospects in baseball is looking like one of the best prospects in baseball. It's just been, about health for him really above all.
Yeah, definitely. The next guy up is another one who I think this guy's pretty much a slam dunk to be in the bigs next year. Rafael Flores of the Pirates organization was traded over to Pittsburgh in that David Bednar trade this deadline from the Yankees. Yankees have done a good job with some catching development here the past handful of years. This is another guy who, at the time of the trade, was looking like an up arrow prospect, and lately has taken his stock in AAA and made it even stronger. His last 19 games, it's a 347 batting average with a 1048 OPS, 169 WRC plus. The power's there. Strikeout rate is at a reasonable clip for Flores. My question to you is is he the future behind the dish for Pittsburgh? He's playing some first too. He's played first and caught for Pittsburgh. What do you think the timeline is here right now with Flores?
I think he's probably a guy that is, of the three that we just talked about, may be the most likely to break camp because you look at the desperation for offense in Pittsburgh, and you look at their catching situation with Henry Davis and just the way things have kind of gone. I feel like you kind of have a guy that can do both here, where if you still want to give some other catchers some run, you can do that and allow those guys to still get some opportunities, but you don't have to worry about fully cutting into Flores' ABs because he can go play some first base. He can DH a little bit as well because I'm sure they still think Joey Bart can be a little bit more of a contributor as well. But I think Flores is a guy that could end up taking that primary catcher role for them, and it wouldn't surprise me at all because the defense has gotten so much better, where the receiving has become a good asset for him. I think the catch and throw has gotten better as well. But then, you mentioned the offense. He's hitting the ball hard, and they need bats, period, whether he's catching, whether he's playing first, whether he's DHing. But now the fact that he can actually catch and then also be an asset for you in the lineup, I think it would make sense for him to be on that opening day roster, especially for a Pirates team that does not need to be a good offense to hang around the wild card, as we know. They've got plenty of pitching. So I think that the trend, you got a 995 OPS over the last 20 games. He's hitting the ball in the air. He's hitting the ball hard. That's always been his MO. But now just getting in the air more consistently. The swing decisions continue to look better and better. And then the defense being where it's at for a guy who's 6'4", 230. I feel like the Pirates have to be really excited about Flores here.
Yeah, and he's sneaky, almost 25 too. He was a little bit of a late bloomer in terms of the prospect stuff. So there's reason to believe there. If he was 22 doing this in AAA, maybe you take your time with him a little more. But for a Pirates team that needs a little bit more help at catching position, but generally on offense, of course, he's 25 years old going into next season. That seems like kind of a no-brainer to make your roster and be, even if you don't feel like he's your 5-6 days a week catcher, sure, he's a 4-day a week catcher or a 3-day a week catcher, at least at the onset of his career.
Yeah, I think the one thing would just be cutting down the run game a little bit more. But if he's a great receiver, and I don't think it's as big of a deal on the catch and throw side of things. If he's catching 3-4 times a week and hitting, in the first base DH spot the other couple times a week, it's better than a lot. It has more upside than a lot of the other bats they've been rolling out there.
Yeah, exactly. So it definitely seems like a guy who should break camp and is someone, has been even better now than he's been for the rest of the season. So an up arrow guy. The next catcher up, another catcher, we've given a lot of love to the trio in Detroit, but we definitely have, given more to Kevin McGonigal and Max Clark because both of them have been incredible. Josue Briceño, the third piece of that group, is also really good, man. He's really good, and we've talked about the power for him, but lately in Double A, it's all come together because he has had a little bit of a slower transition to Double A compared to those other two guys. His last 14 games, though, at the Double A level, 145 WRC plus. He's slugging at a 464 clip. He's getting on base at a very solid clip. The walk rate's up to 12% in that time frame from Briceño. He just looks like he's found his groove in Double A after a little bit of a transition period, and now you go into next season and the Tigers have a lot of options with the way they handle this roster the rest of this year, but also just more going into next year and beyond. Like, they've got a lot of talent on the big league roster, and then they've got a trio of prospects that, it wouldn't be crazy for all those guys to debut next year, and you could see them making an impact in their own ways. You just got to figure out how that offense looks from a roster standpoint still.
Yeah, because they've got guys, that are doing well at the big league level, so there's a great problem to have. And I think it was a little bit of a slower acclimation for Briceño just because he was expected to do more, right? You got to handle catching a Double A staff, and I think that's been the craziest part to me. Is I really was skeptical from the looks that I got of Briceño in Low A and whether he was going to be able to actually catch. I thought maybe you just start to transition this thing into first base full time, and I still think the defense is fringy, but he's 100% improved himself from a catch and throw perspective. He's been limiting the running game really well this year. The blocking, receiving, I think that's where he starts to look a lot more like a 6'4", longer guy, where sometimes he doesn't move as well or as quickly, but he's a pretty good athlete for his size back there. And I think he's got a shot to be, close enough to average catcher in the aggregate, but it's all about the bat here with him. And the reason why he's just continues to climb is how exciting the upside is offensively, as you alluded to. And, we're seeing that. And you imagine the focus for him has very much been defensively, because I think the Tigers want to see him now potentially just be able to catch even a few times a week. But if he really was just focusing on the bat, like we saw, that's kind of where the offensive breakout really came last year after the knee issue. And he went nuts offensively as they were mostly DHing him and playing him at first. And we saw that in the fall league as well, where he didn't really catch. And I think now we're seeing him just settle in as maybe the catching has become less of a learning curve and he's settled in there. But I imagine if they ever put the catching thing on ice, I'm not saying they should, but it would make things even easier for him offensively, where he can move really quickly. But if he continues to develop as this well-rounded player here who can even be a 40-grade catcher with the offense that he brings to the table, still just 20 years old, I mean, this is one of the more exciting young power bats in the minor leagues. And, I mean, you look at some of the data points. It's 107 mile per hour, 90th percentile exit velocity. It's a 45% hard hit rate. And as you mentioned, in those last 10 games, to be doing what he's doing in Double A, striking out less than 20% of the time. And probably one of the biggest shifts in spray I've seen in a while, where in Low A, he was putting the ball on the ground 50+% of the time. And then once he came back from that knee issue and cleaned up his mechanics a little bit, all of a sudden he's hitting the ball in the air all the time. This year, it's a 31% ground ball rate. And that's just been so impressive when you pair that with the raw power too.
Yeah, definitely. And what's interesting with the Tigers situation is you've got Dylan Dinkler there, who's actually been a really solid catcher this season too. So that's what's tricky is, and you've got Torkelson at first as well. So with Briceño, you don't want to put the catching on ice necessarily, like you mentioned there, but he could be your 2-3 day a week catcher while mashing in the DH the rest of the days and being Dingler's backup almost, because Dingler's a quality catcher. Like you're not feeling pressure to get Dingler off of catching or get to innings away from him. So you can have Briceño be the second half of a catching platoon while also just absolutely raking at DH a handful of days a week.
I think we're seeing a changing of the guard a little bit, right, in terms of how teams approach this if the opportunity presents itself, right? Like we talked about it with the Orioles. Adley Rutschman is not getting traded because of the Basayo extension. But we've always traditionally thought backup catcher should be defensive-oriented, Austin Hedges type, right? Yeah, if your primary catcher is more offensive-minded, sure. But if you happen to have a primary catcher who's a pretty good hitter and a really good defender, and you have a prospect coming up who rakes, with the universal DH now, it really does open up different opportunities here, and you can now maximize things get your catcher out of your starting catcher out of the crouch a little bit, but not compromise offense like having a pitcher essentially hitting for you, which is the way it is with some of these backup catchers through the years. So I think we're seeing a new catching tandem if possible. Obviously, not every team has the liberty of having these kinds of setups, but we're seeing it more and more now. And that's why if Briceño is a 40-grade catcher, he's only doing it a couple times a week. And in aggregate at the position, you're going to still have above average defensive production because Briceño's not killing you. And Dingler's a well above average defender who's catching the majority of the time. And it's all about that bat then and keeping that bat in the lineup. And then getting Dingler a couple days off here and there with Briceño being able to fill in. So I like that new kind of reimagined tandem for catchers for teams that have that situation. And I think that's exactly what the Tigers can look forward to with Briceño.
Yeah, and there's plenty of other teams doing that, right? It's not only even just like an offensive-minded backup, right? I think about the White Sox right now with Teal and Caro, where it's like this. There's attaching tandems around baseball right now, and I think it's becoming more and more common, like you just said there. So Briceño, if he's the less catching but mashing back, end of the Tigers, that team, man. When you put McGonigal in at shortstop, and then you factor Max Clark into that outfield, when you look at center field being Javi, but also just kind of having been a little bit of a weak spot for them, you look at the 2026 Tigers, and you have Max Clark in center potentially, Kevin McGonigal at short, and Briceño as your catching DH duo. Like, whew, man, that's a nasty team.
Yeah, they're in a really good spot moving forward, and they've got plenty of talent at the big league level right now too. So it's going to be interesting to see how they can kind of allocate things. It makes it really easy with the shortstop and center field situation because those are kind of two obvious gaps. But Briceño, it's going to be fun to see kind of how they want to move things around there.
Yeah, exactly. The next guy up, there's a different Brewers prospect every week that we're talking about at this point, and this guy we really haven't gotten the chance to talk about yet, and we need to, because Blake Burke, Brewers draft pick last year, has been really, really impressive since getting to Double A in the Southern League, one of the harder places to hit. He's played 34 games so far in Double A, and he's good for a 377 on base percentage, 555 slug, 171 WRC plus in that time. Burke is striking out at a reasonable 24-25%, which is high, but like that is his profile. He's walking at a good clip, 9 home runs in those first 34 games in Double A for Blake Burke.
He's been really, really impressive, as you alluded to, and it's a guy I liked out of the draft, and then got a couple looks at him in spring training, and it felt like every at bat I watched, he was rocketing balls. And there was one that I know I posted on X. It was like a backside laser beam. I'm like, okay, this guy's got some special low effort bat speed here. The thing that was interesting in the early part of the year, a little bit over aggressive, a little bit. I think that the aggression would result in a ground ball rate that was a bit high, and the path could get a bit flat. Since he's got to Double A, as you mentioned, like it's just been different. And I thought, well, it could go one of two ways, right? I mean, you go to the Southern League, and it's a lot of places that are tough to hit in. I think sometimes it just feels like the ball is not flying. You're a little bit aggressive already. The stuff is a bit better. You're going to see some challenges here. But he really was proving that whatever he had figured out in High A was significant enough to convert into Double A as well. And now he's really allowing that natural ability to shine through. He really turned some heads earlier this year too when he popped to 117. And I think that was one where even some people in the Brewers org, there was some buzz about that. It's like, well, okay, he's got that in the tank. And then beyond that, you're just seeing how easily he can hit the ball hard consistently in this 30-game stretch, 304, 378, 589 slash line, 53% hard hit rate in that span and an EV90 of 108 miles per hour. But when you watch him hit, it doesn't look like requires much effort to get into that. And that makes me feel good about how consistently he's going to be just putting up 95 pluses. And probably a guy that can get away with a little bit higher of a ground ball rate or a little bit lower of a hard hit launch angle because of how hard he hits the ball consistently. But also it leaves you thinking, how much more power is in the tank if he can start elevating just a little bit more? And I think we're already starting to see that a bit. The only thing that I'm not really worried about that. Only thing I'm looking at is the chase. And it's not a big issue right now. I think the feel to hit for how powerful he is going to help hedge that concern. But that chase has hovered north of 30% all year. And it's just something that I do think can rear its head against higher quality secondaries. Clearly, it's not an issue yet. just something to monitor a little bit, but he seems to hedge that with still pretty good swing decisions when he needs to bear down.
Yeah, yet another guy in the Brewers system who there might be a couple things to work on, but there's still a lot of talent there and a lot of excitement. And there's another Brewers guy we're going to talk about in a little while. And it's how it goes when I'm looking through these heat sheets. And every week there's more and more Brewers players that are standing out, honestly.
It's a testament to the org, but I think it's the scouting side of things, of course, but then really recognizing the types of players that they can succeed with in terms of the development side of things. And, you see Fisher, who they just took, another first baseman type that moves similarly. They're IDing these types of guys, these bigger bodied guys that move a little bit better than they get credit for, and they're able to maximize those mechanics and biomechanics, which I know the Brewers are big on.
Yeah, definitely, man. Sebastian Walcott has arrived. Texas Rangers top prospect, top 10 prospect in baseball. We've talked about multiple times this year how it's been a little bit of a slow acclimation to Double A. 19-year-old shortstop. We've tried to encourage the patience there, and I think everybody has been patient with him. But man, the last 3 weeks for Walcott, it has been like everything that you want to see from Walcott. His past 3 weeks, it's a 166 WRC plus, OPS of 929 in that span. Walking at a 17% clip, only striking out at an 11% clip. The numbers are just entirely different from where they were earlier in the season. I mean, on the year, you're still looking at a 20% K rate. Earlier in the season, though, it was in that 25 range. Now it's 11 in the past 3 weeks plus at this point. And yeah, that's a small sample, but like it's not a week sample. It's almost a month now of him not striking out, walking more, and producing even more impact. Sebastian Walcott is 19, right? He's not going to be 20 until spring training next year. And he's already now, after a season of acclimating, looking like he can handle Double A.
And I imagine this was the plan all along. I don't think the Rangers were saying, if he's not raking in the first half, like we're expecting to get him up to triple by the All-Star break. Like, no, they knew that he was going to struggle a little bit, and there was going to be a process here. But it's funny, you mentioned like he was at 25%, and then he cut it down. If you told me going into this year, Sebastian Walcott's going to strike out 25% of the time in Double A for the entirety of the season, I'd say, okay, that's fine. Like, that's not a big deal. He's a 19-year-old 6'4" power hitter in the Texas League, who just turned 19. But the fact that that was the high point, and now it's gone down and down and down, and that we have a 20-game stretch here where he has struck out 11 times and walked 16 times, and you have a full season now where it is, by decimal point, below 20% K rate, and by the end of the season will be comfortably, I think, closer to 19%. I mean, that is the most exciting side of things. Yeah, 738 OPS on the season. Whatever. I don't think I need to convince people about Sebastian Walcott's upside. The fact that he's surviving and sprinting through the finish line here, I think is so encouraging. There was never really a stretch where he looked blatantly overmatched. I think there was just stretches where he just wasn't getting to the peak of his powers because he was more in defense mode. I think more just trying to survive. But there's a difference between battling and being overmatched. And I think for him, he met his match. And if a 19-year-old is meeting his match in Double A, I think that's a really good sign of things to come, and I think we're already seeing that now. It's also like this 20-game stretch, he's still working to get into the game power a little bit more. So the fact that he, in 20 games, has 2 home runs, but is still just lacing line drives all over the field and hitting 325 in that span is really encouraging. I think he's still a candidate to refine the mechanics a little bit to allow him to create a little bit more loft. I think he can get a little bit flat and a little bit long to the ball at times, but that's something that I think he can find in the offseason. I think he's already started to find a little bit, in this hot stretch. And as he finds a little bit more loft, I think you're going to see a lot more game power there. But clearly, he hit the ball so hard consistently that it's going to get through a lot. It's going to be a lot of line drive base hits and things of that nature. But I think as he can find a little bit more of that ability to air pull, which will come, I think, with just cleaning things up just a bit in the box, the sky's the limit with a guy like him.
Yeah, it's hard not to just look at what he's doing and look at the improvement and dream on the guy who could be, a top 2-3 prospect in baseball. And not just that, but like, if he doesn't graduate before, assuming Connor Griffin and Kevin McGonigal graduate before Walcott, like there's legitimate top prospect in baseball upside here. And you're starting to really see the next level of that for someone who's still so young, man. He's so young for the level.
Yep.
So a lot to be excited about there with Walcott. A couple names here that I'm not sure we definitely haven't talked about here, and I don't know how much you have familiarity with. And I just saw the numbers and they popped out, and I've had my eye on Deniel Ortiz of the Cardinals organization. I've almost put him in a couple other heat sheets because he's been really good all season. This was a 16th round pick last year. Since getting to high A about a month and a half ago and finishing out his season in high A, it's 30 games at a 169 WRC plus in that span with an OPS at 938. I don't know a ton on Ortiz. I've seen the numbers all season. Late draft pick. Just a shout here because he's been really, really good consistently for multiple months now. What you got on him?
Yeah, I don't know a ton either, which is the fun part of these heat sheets is sometimes it's just guys that, we're not totally on the radar. It's a pretty unorthodox operation, but the thing that I think impresses me with him is the ability to hit it hard in the air to all fields. And I mean, he is foul pole to foul pole. Really comfortable catching the ball deep, but also quick enough if it's a hanger to catch it out front and pull it hard in the air. And I mean, when you've got a 30-game stretch where a guy's hitting 330, that's going to be really encouraging stuff. I just turned 21, so probably about age to level at high A now. I think at low A, you're expecting a guy like that to maybe get comfortable and start to feast. But I think the swing decisions and the angles are what's really interesting to me. I think he's going to swing and miss a fair amount when you're looking at it, but when you're able to make the good swing decisions, be very patient, produce above average exit velocities and hit the ball in the air, like a guy like that's always got a chance. And I think they're starting to transition him a little bit more to first base, so that may put a bit more pressure on the bat, but there's no doubting that he has unlocked something offensively this year. And I think there's several hitters in this Cardinals org. You'll get Josh Baez as well, who seemed to be stalled out at the lower levels this year or the last few years, and then broke out in a big way this year as well. Now doing it at Double A. Seems like the Cardinals have had some success with some of their guys that maybe didn't show the best things in the last couple of years and had the ability though, and are starting to really convert that into game production.
Yeah, definitely. Just a fun name to watch there. I think the Cardinal system is one that is trending the right direction in general. And this is an example of a guy who was not on any prospect radar and has had a really good season. And you've seen just quality growth from him. And there's many other examples of that in St. Louis.
I would say Baez. We owe him like probably a segment at some point in the next few episodes. I know he's not technically a heat sheet candidate. He's come down to earth a little bit. But just in the sake of that conversation, I'm looking at his data and what he's done this year. Like, what a 180 from him. And when we update the rest of the farm systems, it's going to be fun to kind of dive into what other Cardinals have. We're going to talk about Deniel Rodriguez as well, but how many Cardinals have taken an offensive leap this year in that system?
Yeah, definitely a good amount at the lower levels, it seems like. Another guy who has, not a ton of pedigree here, traded over in the Camilo Doval trade with the Yankees, Parks Harber of the Giants organization. Great name, first of all. And since coming over to the Giants in that Doval trade, he's played 25 games for San Francisco at the high A level, has put up a 195 WRC plus, nearly an 1100 OPS since joining the Giants. He's walking at a good clip, not striking out a ton. He's tapping into power. I've heard some really good things from someone in the Giants organization who thinks that this is one of their better offensive prospects, even though he just got there about a month ago.
Yeah, he's interesting because, with Harber, when I was looking at the data when we did the Yankee system, the raw power was crazy. There was enough bat to ball in the zone, but then there was egregious out of zone whiff, and I'm like, man. Usually when I see that, it's because a guy's a very stiff mover and he has one swing for one spot. But I don't know if that's necessarily the case for Harber, and he's gotten a lot better at that, especially since changing orgs. And I think maybe just loosening up a little bit in the box, having a bit more malleability, and that's been starting to shine through. I thought maybe a bit more of a mistake hitter, and I still think he skews towards that. But you're starting to see that out-of-zone contact rate improve, and I think that's been a big part of him cutting down on the K rate. And then the swing decisions are still really solid as well. Harber looks like a good get for them. When we talk about the exit velocities, man, 56% hard hit rate on the year and an EV90 of 108. Again, for reference, I would say the average EV90 at the Double A or high A level, it's probably going to be right around 102. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I can promise you it's several standard deviations below 108. He's hitting the living crap out of the ball, and I think this is just a fun power bat. A lot of pressure on the bat because there's not a ton of defensive utility. But what I think is interesting is since he's joined the Giants org, they've started to roll him out in left field a little bit. maybe he can come along a little bit more there. They've been really focused on playing him at third. We'll see, but this is a fun get for a reliever and a guy that, yes, he's a little bit older, and I think that's probably why he's going to skew a little bit towards the more forgotten side of things on prospect lists. But when you got those batted ball specs, no matter the age, I'm intrigued. But we'll see how he adjusts to Double A next year. I think that'll be a big test.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the defensive value because it is interesting to note that he hasn't played any first for the Giants, and he's primarily played third with some corner outfield mixed in there. Obviously, if he can play a corner outfield spot, especially left field, it takes a little bit of pressure off of the offensive profile and some of the things he's still working through there offensively.
Yeah, I mean, it can't hurt, and I think if he could just be survivable out there, I think you're going to feel pretty good about just the fact that, hey, we got a guy that I think the Yankees looked at as a first baseman, and we can at least move him around a little bit here. So I'm excited. That's a video dive I'm probably going to do, and it's funny, we just did the Giant system, but I'm probably going to have to update it a little bit more with some of those trades and some of the players that have emerged. And Harber is going to be one of those guys that probably sneaks into that, top 15 consideration.
Yeah, definitely. Last hitter up here before we move over to the pitching side. It's another Brewer. It's Eric Bitonti, and I know this is a guy that you've had your eye on for a while here, and it's been, I wouldn't say a rough season, but a development season for Bitonti, who spent the whole year in Single A as a raw but powerful, young high school draft pick there. His last week, just finishing out the Single A season, and they're not in the playoffs, I believe, so I think his season is done now. But the last week for Bitonti, 7 games of 10 for 21. So he goes across that last week, goes 10 for 21 with 3 extra base hits, 9 walks, only 4 strikeouts in that span. Obviously a super small sample, but when we're talking about heat sheet, sometimes we're looking just really recently, and it's cool to see Bitonti after an up and down season just finish on such a high note.
Yeah, and especially I'm glad you bring him up because I just can't quit this guy. I understand the risks here, and the funny thing is when I was getting ready for this heat sheet, I'm thinking, okay, well, I was kind of hoping he'd make a leap this year. I even thought of him as a potential breakout guy, and I'm like, maybe next year, he'll be 20, 21 years old probably. He's still 19. He'll be 20 years old next year, but I thought he was 20 by now. It's easy to forget that this dude is still just 19 years old. So yeah, I think because of what he did last year and how quickly he hit his way off of the complex and all that good stuff and the early positive signs at low A, I think it was easy to think, he could be this super accelerated prospect here. He's 6'5", 225 pounds, and one of the younger guys for the class. Yeah. Going to take a little bit here. And so the fact that he's sprinting through the finish line, I think was really encouraging. I understand that there's a chance he may never hit enough, but he's athletic for his size. He hits the living crap out of the ball. He has a decent feel for the zone. And it's just a guy that it could click at 22 as well. It may click next year, but even in this somewhat disappointing year, it's a 761 OPS because of the way he finished. The strikeout rate's too high, obviously, at 33.5%. But over that 10-game stretch, as you mentioned, cut it down a good bit. Over the final 15 games of the season, it was below 25% or right at 25%. So it was heading in the right direction. And if you start to sort by just righties, he's a lot better in that regard too. So at the worst, maybe a guy that you shelter from lefties. But I'm never going to count out, or at least it's going to take me a lot longer than age 19 season to count out a guy this powerful that moves the way that he does.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel about it. I think it's hard to rule out a guy who just has this much upside still and is, you're seeing the spurts of it here to end out the season. Before we dive into some pitchers, let's take a quick break. We're back with more guys on the heat sheet. On the pitching side, there's nobody that I think we can reasonably start with right now other than Robby Snelling because we've been big fans of him for a while. We've talked about him a bunch. And the Marlins prospect. Yeah, of course, friend of the program. But the Marlins prospect, this isn't the results are what matters here, and they're what speaks here. It's just been an insane 2 months, frankly, for Snelling. 2.5 months now, really, since July. He has been incredible. Lately, his last start 2 days ago, 6 innings of 1 run, 3 hit ball, 7 strikeouts. The start before that, 7 innings of 1 run ball, 13 strikeouts, no walks. The 2 starts before that, 6 innings of no run, 8 strikeout ball, 6 innings of 9 strikeout, no run ball. more starts than not of his for 3 months straight have been no runs or maybe 1 run, right? Where's your head at with Snelling in terms of just how good he can be? Because I know we think he's going to obviously debut for Miami next season, if not, I don't think the end of this year, but definitely in 2026 he's going to debut. Just how good can he be? Because we're seeing another level of Snelling now the past couple months.
Yeah, and I think having him on the show to kind of just like break down what he is, what clicked for him, I think really is eye-opening to what he can ultimately be, right? Because how did you gain a tick or almost 2 ticks on the fastball? Actually, now it's like 3 ticks on the fastball. But not only that, how did you gain the vert? And he's like, I totally like focused on the mechanics and my delivery and how I can stay behind the ball. And it's like, okay, that is a clear improvement there that seems like a sustainable uptick there in velocity and fastball quality. And it's held all year. And then, what did you find with the secondaries that's been so good for you? Well, the mechanical adjustments that I've made are helping me just throw more strikes and have a good feel for it. Also, I'm paraphrasing for him, but also, the curveball that I love has been a big part of my arsenal. Previous org I was with told me to scrap it. Now I get to throw it again, and it's been a huge part of my success. He's very right about that. It's been the second most used pitch for him, and opponents are hitting 233 against it with a 618 OPS. But since he's got to AAA, they're barely hitting by the Mendoza line with a 500 OPS. But you think about this. Fastball with more ride than ever and harder than ever. And a downer curveball off of that, tunnel nightmare. Now the changeup is playing up because of that. Even though it's not a great pitch shape-wise, it's pretty good. Plays up because the fastball sets the tone the way that it does. And then the Marlins and him worked on this kind of bridge slider that has been a fine fourth pitch to just mix in there. But I think the fastball quality has changed everything from a ceiling perspective now. We're seeing in Major League Baseball guys that don't have the best stuff from like a stuff plus perspective. Look at an Andrew Abbott who is just continuing to succeed. Lefties with just deception or good like fastballs that are going to perform a little bit better than you think. Really, it sets the tone for everything else. And when you look at Robby Snelling's fastball this year, it's funny because I think nobody would have thought that you'd be referring to Robby Snelling's fastball as a plus pitch. But how could you not? 72% strike rate, a 27% in-zone whiff rate, and opponents are hitting 165 against it. That's a plus heater. And from the left side, you could argue better than that. So filling up the zone with it, dominating in the zone with it, and just frankly avoiding barrels, that is a phenomenal heater. And if you sort by AAA only, it's been even more dominant. His last 10 starts, it's a 35% in-zone whiff rate. For reference, like on a fastball, I think a good in-zone whiff rate in that league would be like 17, 18%, 19% would be probably like slightly above average. He's dominating with that heater, which is crazy because pitchability has never been a question for this guy. So now I'm looking at him and saying, I think you can, if that fastball continues to play the same way, you can dream on a 2-starter here. But I think it's more likely that he's a really solid middle rotation arm with the intangibles to really maximize everything that he's got.
Yeah, and there's a reason he was, ranked as highly as he was, but before he had a little bit of a down year last year, right? Because he was so exciting and so much talent, such a good athlete, right? Coming out of high school, even there's just a lot to like there with Snelling, and now he's made that jump where you laid it all out perfectly there. He's going to be, a middle rotation starter. It seems like for Miami very soon.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see what he's going to do at the big league level, and he should absolutely break camp next year.
Yeah, no reason for him not to when you consider a couple spots in that rotation and are there for the taking right now. First time we're doing a trio here on the heat sheet, and I looked at each of these guys individually, and they've all had their ups and downs, but I'm not sure there's a better trio at one level in minor league baseball for one team than the Yankees trio of Elmer, Rodriguez-Cruz, Carlos Lagrange, and Ben Hess right now. The three of them are different pitchers. They're all very unique, and all three of them in their own right have had some excellent outings lately. Elmer Rodriguez-Cruz is coming off back-to-back shutout outings of 6 and 5 innings, 8 strikeouts in each of those games. Carlos Lagrange coming off a game in which he threw 5 innings of shutout ball with 10 strikeouts and 1 walk. And then you've got Ben Hess, who was a high-end college guy, totally different type of guy than the two other pieces in this trio. His last 2 starts in a row have been 2 starts in a row of 1-run ball in each of those games. These three are all very impressive in their own right. What do you see the kind of staggering here with three pitchers for the Yankees? And they've done a good job developing these guys. I'm very curious to see which one of these three moves quicker and kind of how that goes.
Yeah, I am too, because Ben Hess, I mean, the fastball has always been impressive, and the carry that he gets on it and the ability to fill up the zone with it was really, I think, a big intrigue. But he just didn't have a lot going for him secondaries wise, and the command was just so iffy through the early parts of the season. I mean, you look at his first 11 starts, pretty much up until the All-Star break, so 12 starts here, he walked 14% of batters. Since then, he's made 10 starts. He's walked 7% of batters, Ben Hess has, while striking out 30%. So to see the command make a leap like that, super encouraging. Big part of the reason why is fastball just establishing that at the top of the zone with a 71% strike rate with the high carry that it gets. But then now, like, the secondary command could still be better, but he's around the zone enough with it. The curveball has been effective for him at about a 60% strike rate. And then the slider and the changeup still could be better from a command perspective, but at 56%, it's enough where hitters have to respect that. And I think that's been the big wrinkle for him, because I think through stretches earlier in the year, those were pitchers that hitters could kind of eliminate to a degree. But I think that the four-seam command has really unlocked a lot for Hess, and that's the kind of pitcher that the Yankees seem to do a good job with. And I think he's getting closer and closer to being able to be, a legitimate piece for them. And I think his stuff may translate as well as anybody to the big league level. I think with Rodriguez-Cruz, there's some questions about how that pitch plot is going to translate at the highest level. But I think he's just going to outpitch the peripherals a little bit, just because of the deep bag of offerings he has. And we've seen that over this stretch here, where it's a sinker at 96, it's a curveball at 80, it's a changeup at 89, it's a four-seamer at 96, it's a sweeper at 83, and then another slider at like 90. And I think when you look at the pitch shapes, none of them jump off the page, but it's very distinguishable velocity gaps. And I think that's something that keeps hitters off balance and is enough to, I think, be a differentiator for him. And I think he could be more of a solid back end of the rotation starter, but when he's on, I think he's a guy that can absolutely shove. And then who was the third again?
Carlos Lagrange.
Oh, well, and then,
yeah.
I mean, his stuff is crazy. For Lagrange, it's just all about the command. But I don't think I need to sell you on the stuff too much of a guy that it's been a little bit of a velocity fluctuation thing, where some outings he's been sitting 99, 100. And then other outings, it's more 97, 98, all hard. But the last time out, he averaged 101 miles per hour on his fastball. And that's why he went 5 innings, no runs, 1 walk, 10 Ks. His pitch shapes aren't as exciting, but he also throws harder than both of these guys. So I think he's going to be a little bit more velo dependent. When he's 98 to 100 versus 96 to 98, that fastball is going to be playing in the plus to plus territory versus above average. I know you're thinking 96 to 98 above average. Well, from his high release, it can flatten out on him a little bit, so the velo matters. The gyro slider is disgusting, and that pitch is always going to be there for him. But he has kind of been a 1-2, like a 1-2 punch guy, meaning it's just been fastball slider. The sweeper and changeup had been lagging behind at points. Now having that changeup there for him the last handful of starts, I think that's really unlocked more for him. And these guys are all really fascinating. They're all volatile, so I'm interested to see what that looks like, but all very exciting.
Yeah, when you've got a trio of prospects in AA that are all striking out 30+% of batters, like, you got to feel excited, even though they're different and they all have some range of outcomes. They're still all striking out the world at the AA level, and they're all going to be in play next season, maybe even if it's later in the season, to help the Yankees in some role. And I think you can look at the stuff too and see that if, at least for Lagrange and Hess, and maybe not as much Cruz, but Lagrange and Hess, like, if it doesn't come together as much, like, those are dogs in the bullpen potentially, right? Yep. If that's the worst outcome for any of these guys, right, you could get a really good high leverage arm out of those guys, especially.
100%.
So, moving on to the other New York, a pair of guys in the Mets system, and there's probably even more pitchers we could talk about in the Mets system, and it feels like you guys have touched on Tong and Sprode and everybody else, McClain, of course. The other two guys coming up, Jonathan Santucci, and then RJ Gordon is the other one I want to mention there from the Mets system. They just had nailed the last year's draft, it feels like. Almost every pick in their 2024 class is doing something impressive. Santucci's been good for a while now. He's had a couple blow-ups, but largely has been very good. His last 2 starts have been 6 innings of 1-run ball, 5 innings of no-run ball. He's just had a great season overall, start to finish. And then R.J. Gordon is a guy who was a 13th-round pick, and another guy that seems like the Mets are just developing the heck out of. Just had a really rough start this last time out, but before that, he had gone 3 straight starts with no runs, 1 run, 7+ strikeouts in all 3 of those outings. 2 more guys the Mets are just developing well, and they just keep doing this with a lot of pitchers.
Well, you're seeing why Santucci had some first-round buzz going into his draft year, but of course, command was the big problem there, and it ended up pushing him outside of that first round. But since he's joined the Mets org, clearly things have been cleaned up with his delivery. And you mentioned a couple blow-ups, but for the most part, he's been filling up the zone at a significantly better clip than he was at Duke, which is always impressive. And yeah, I still think there's room for more. And that's the craziest part. Clearly just a supinator. So like he is throwing that slider confidently for a strike. Like the last 10 outings, he's got a 70% strike rate on the slider. The fastball strike rate's only 60%. So like if he could establish that heater in the zone a little bit more consistently, I think we'd see even more encouraging results. But this is still a guy that, I mean, you look at what he's been able to do. It's so impressive because you know that there's still more in the tank. He can spin a good curveball. It's just the command of it. And the last 2 outings, when you've got no walks from Santucci and 13 strikeouts, that's a really good trend to finish out the year. It's a fastball that averages in the mid-90s. That upper 80s slider has been just dominant all year long. And then, we'll see how the curveball and changeup come along, but that 1-2 punch is really impressive. And then RJ Gordon it's just a fun scatter plot too with him. He gets great carry on the fastball. He's got a sweeper that he'll mix in there that's like 10 inches of horizontal and zero vert. Then he's got this gyro, really short gyro, almost bullet slider that has been his best pitch all year. And the confidence with it is amazing. Like he's not even getting a ton of whiff within the zone on it. It's decent, but a ton of chase just below the zone, a ton of ground balls, and he's throwing it nearly 40% of the time. So more than his four-seamer, and just dotting with it. 70% strike rate, east-west, just at the bottom of the zone working it, and it's a really unique way to kind of use that bullet slider and get a lot of weak contact and ground balls. And then as you start to bring your sights down, that's where he'll sneak the four-seamer up. But then he's got the splitter that also works off of that well at a couple ticks slower. And then he's got this curveball that may end up being the best swing and miss pitch of the bunch that he just needs to execute a little bit better. It's a really fun pitch mix here, and it seems like that's what the Mets are doing is they're identifying these arms that they can really just overhaul the arsenal a little bit, and they're having success in doing it.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like there's a lot of progress being made. That arsenal sounds pretty disgusting. I watched a couple of videos of Gordon, and it looked really fun just because he can mix and match and kind of spot all over the place and keep batters off their hands. And, these guys are both in Double A, both college draft picks. So I don't know where the Mets are fitting all this pitching, but it gives you reason to believe they don't really need to spend much on pitching. And they might still do it because they can, but they've got a lot of pitching to deploy next season.
And as we saw at the deadline, they're creating trade assets too, right? I mean, they traded several arms, and if they wanted to do it in the offseason or in the deadline again next year, they're to just continue to create assets.
Yeah, and they're going to, we know if the season trends the way it's trending right now and they don't have the best of seasons and finishes this year in the playoffs, Steve Cohen's not going to hesitate to do what needs to be done this offseason, and there's a lot of guys in the system you can look at and say, okay, that's a pretty appealing asset to a team that would be giving up a big-time player to help out the Mets.
No doubt.
Definitely. The next guy up is a Blue Jays prospect, and another organization we've talked about a lot of pitchers this season. Gage Stanifer is an interesting name to mention here. A 2022 pick out of high school for Toronto, still just 21 years old, and had a really good season this year, and just got promoted, got a bump to Double A, had a little bit of a shaky first start in Double A, but generally speaking for Stanifer, it has been a really, really solid season at the high A level for him, and I just wanted to see where you were at, because before this promotion, he had, I think it was 8 straight starts of 2 or less runs allowed and a good amount of strikeouts filling up the zone. What you got on him?
Has there been a bigger 180 than the Blue Jays pitching lab? I mean, they used to be the joke that we'd make, oh my gosh, the Blue Jays took another pitcher, that poor guy, right? Now it seems like every arm that they've taken now in the last year or so, or a couple of years, is just really trending in the right direction. It's been really fun to watch. High carry fastball at 95 that is just overwhelmed hitters, and I think that's been a big part of it. And then working off of that, just a nasty curveball that I just think creates a tunneling nightmare. And that curveball opponents are hitting 140 against with a 381 OPS for Stanifer. So just dominating with that 1-2 punch is really impressive, and still trying to find a consistent feel for a third pitch. And I think he will get there. But that fastball curveball combination has me feeling like at the very least, this guy's going to be a solid bullpen arm if it doesn't work out as a starter. But at 21 years old, he's got plenty of time to find that third pitch. And over the last handful of starts, he's found a lot more confidence in his changeup, which seems to have him on that course already. This is a very fascinating arm that I think is definitely flying under the radar.
Yeah, and the Jays traded a couple of big arms at the deadline, right? So now you fill in, and he seems like he's kind of rising into that next tier of high-end Blue Jays potential pitchers there, and should be getting a little more attention because this season's been really good, and now he reaches Double A, and he'll probably start next season at Double A. And yeah, the first thing I saw when I looked at the video was that fastball curveball, and it's pretty disgusting. And you've got 2+ pitches. If he can find that changeup, if he can, if he adds another pitch even potentially down the road, you've got at least the basis of a young guy with 2 really good pitches.
I'm counting right now, I think, how many starts this year he has struck out at least 7 to that point. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 starts where he struck out at least 7, and a lot of those were 8, a couple 10 strikeout games, and several 9 strikeout games. When he's on, he was just overpowering low A, and mostly high A hitters.
High A, yeah, it's 36% strikeout rate on the year. That's an arm to be watching for sure.
Yeah, no doubt.
Next guy up is Joey Oakie of the Cleveland Guardians organization. High school draft pick last year, a guy that I was a big fan of coming out of the draft. I remember having him keyed in on my board of high school guys who was drafted had just turned 18 at time of draft last year, and has taken a big step forward. The whole season, he had a little bit of a delay to the season. He's only thrown a number of games, and I believe it's 6 games in Single A now for Oakie this season. Those 6 games have been very impressive, though, particularly the last 2. He's coming off of 2 straight 11 strikeout shutout outings, and has not thrown more than 5 innings in a game. 4 2/3, 1 hit, 1 walk, 11 strikeouts, 5 innings, no hits, 11 strikeouts in the past 2 starts for Oakie.
Yeah, he was a preseason breakout pick for me, and maybe a little aggressive because of how careful they've been with him. He was 18 years old at the start of the season. They paid a lot of money, the Guardians, to sign Oakie away, and I mean, you can see why. That fastball is averaged 96 miles per hour. The characteristics on it are really fascinating as well. I mean, it's a funky release that I think for hitters, it's just tough to pick up. And the command was a little bit inconsistent, I think, in the early going, and he's just still trying to adjust and find things and settle in. He's 6'3", 200, and with a funky release. But I think we're seeing now as he starts to hone in a little bit. I mean, this is a really unique look that between the fastball changeup combination and then that slider that he'll mix in as well, it's a very projectable 3-pitch mix that with the built-in deception could have him, sticking in a rotation and being quite nasty. But I love the fact that the fallback is a nasty leverage reliever. But this is a really fun player here that I think I'm going to pick again to break out next year because he was the breakout pick this year. But just seeing him be anywhere near the zone for a couple start stretch and just what it has done for him. I mean, in the beginning, the changeup was not really there and the slider was hit or miss. And then in those last 3 starts, he started to really land that slider. You added a curve and started to phase out the changeup a little bit, which I think is interesting. And those results were really encouraging, and just being able to establish the heater the way that he did. I think there's a lot more to be unlocked still because the strike rates, even in those really sharp starts, could have been better. So if he can find a little bit more command-wise, I think this guy could be an absolute monster.
Yeah, and they'll have all of next season build up. They're going to take their sweet time with him. This is the type of upside arm that you don't need to rush. You be patient with. You see how it continues to develop, and the Guardians are one of the better organizations to develop this type of pitcher. And you have to think he'll slowly build up the innings next year. You'll get him more consistently 5-inning starts and such if he's healthy. And then he's still only going to be 19 going into next year, so there's so much time still to figure out what you want with Oakie.
Yeah, and it literally seems like in the midst of this hot stretch, he was tinkering with pitch usage and things like that. I mean, to kind of phase out the changeup and add in the curveball and use the slider with more success. Like I'm interested to see what kind of pitch mix he emerges with next year. And again, the baseline template for him is one that's pretty exciting.
Yeah. Last name on the heat sheet this week, recently turned 19-year-old Milwaukee Brewer. Guess you, surprise, surprise, Melvin Hernandez. I don't know a ton about this guy, but I've seen a couple videos. He had a really, really good season, start to finish. Honestly, it's not overwhelming stuff, but it's really good command. It spent the whole season in Single A at pretty much 18 years old until recently. 121 innings of a 2 ERA ball for Melvin Hernandez, and finishes the season with 4 straight outings of 1 run or less in 5+ innings. The command is really good. I don't know what the upside looks like, but an 18-year-old with a 2 ERA for 120 innings handle is worth mentioning.
Yeah, it's a kind of Carlos Hernandez-ish where he's gonna it's just this lower velocity. It's like 89 miles per hour, where you're gonna get this kind of mixture of heavy sinker, changeup. The changeup is the pitch that I think is really dominated within the zone and been that equalizer for him. But then curveball, slider, four-seamer that'll sneak up at the top. So when you get the sinker, four-seamer, changeup, curveball, slider, he's just kind of going all 4 quadrants, keeping you off balance. And the fact that a guy that is sitting at 89 with his fastball allowed just 1 home run on the year kind of shows you the way that he's able to pick up ground balls when he needs to, get the swing and miss when he needs to. Obviously, if there's more velocity in there, that'll be really encouraging, because if he can creep up to the lower 90s, I think you can really start to talk yourself into a back end of the rotation arm. But he could easily see an uptick. He was 18 years old for the entirety of the season, or most of the season. So it's a fun, just developmental piece here that seems to be like at least a depth arm and innings eater. But I think to see what he's done from a strike throwing perspective, and then missing enough bats when he needs to, just another under the radar guy here in this Brewers system.
Yeah, just one more name to watch there for sure. I just thought I'd put it on the radar just because the numbers were leading the Carolina League in like walk rate and just ERA over the full season. So I was like, oh, this is, we'll see if the stuff can tick up, but definitely got to keep an eye on. That's all we got for this week on the heat sheet. It was a fun one. This is a good group.
Yeah, again, I always like the idea of, and I said Carlos Hernandez, Carlos Rodriguez is who I meant, but Rodriguez kind of that changeup, slower fastball mixture, but Rodriguez is closer to the low, like 92 range. So like that's something that I think you could kind of look at as a template, and something that I know that the Brewers have, liked kind of building up. But yeah, always fun with the new names, and then just being able to check in on some of these guys. We'll probably, you mentioned what one of the types of heat sheets we could probably do next week. We'll also be talking about Arizona Fall League rosters as well, and rolling that all out as a preview there. Some really fun names heading out to the Fall League, some of the best prospects in baseball, and also a Daniel Espino sighting. So we're going to talk a little bit about all of that. But as always, thank you for listening, and look forward to talking prospects with you later this week.